All right, so today what we're gonna do is we're gonna access prior knowledge of analyzing and annotating text. We're gonna collaborate as a class to annotate the philosophical text, and as long as you show me that we can work together to annotate that text, I won't give you guys an independent practice for it. We're also gonna construct a summary of the text after we read it, and I'm gonna ask you to begin contemplating or thinking about the arguments that Kant presents. So today we're just gonna do a quick recap of annotations because you should have gone over it last year. And then we're gonna do the who is immature, Kant's what is enlightenment annotation practice together. I am gonna change this instead of tonight. I'm gonna be nice. I know some of you guys have been having issues and then I didn't really give you as much time as I wanted to in class. So the digital locker is not due until Sunday at 11:59 p.m. Okay. Now, if you're running into issues or anything like that, just email me and let me know. I'll accept it in any way that you give it to me. Okay. Does that sound fair? All right. The index part 2. If you weren't here on the first day, don't stress about it. It's not that big of a deal. All right. So any questions about that? All right. And I'm also going to go into the actual assignment itself and change the due date so it's not showing that you're late. Okay. So annotating. You guys should have learned this last year. Yes. Okay. So the key thing about annotating, at least with me, is I know the district does want us to use this and to follow it, but as long as you're taking notes as you're reading and you're showing that you can comprehend the reading, I'm okay with that, okay? But there are certain things that we do use. I never really number a text. That's even if you look at Ms. Garcia's books, I annotate everything that I read, but I don't really use numbers. I do circle key words that I feel are important or strong words, and I underline important information, and normally I double underline things that are really important, but this says the author's claim when we're doing nonfiction. Question marks. This is a big one for me. I actually put question marks in my own books of things that I need to contemplate. But for you guys, whenever you do put a question mark, make sure you find out the answer. It doesn't help for you to question something and then never figure out what it means, right? So make sure that when you have a question mark, you have an answer. And then I do use the hashtag summary. So every text that I have you guys annotate, I'll have you do the hashtag and ask you for a summary. Why am I doing that? What does summary show me? If you can summarize something, you understand it. Yeah, and in your own words, that you understand it in your own words. So that means you understand the text. I really don't need to go over it with you that much anymore, okay? Now, you also will write in the margins. I write in the margins all the time. You can visualize things. Also, does all annotations have to be words? No, it can be symbols. If you're good at drawing, I have people that will draw things, the connections that they have to it. I can't draw to save my life, so I don't do that. Responding to the text. Sometimes act as if the text is actually talking to you. What is it saying? What's it asking? Question, clarify, connect, and then again, summarize. So again, these are all things that you really should have gone over last year. And in reality, you guys have been learning it off and on throughout your whole lives. Again, as long as you understand the annotations you're making. The reason I say that is, even I found a book that I had read when I was in high school, and I had some annotations in it, and when I was reading it, I had no idea what I was talking about. Like, I didn't understand the markings that I made on that text. Well, is that a good use of annotations? No. Annotations are basically meant for you to be able to quickly review what you've read and the things that you've said about it, so that you don't have to go back and reread the whole thing, okay? So make sure you understand what you're annotating. Here's some quick steps that you need to do when you annotate. First, you're going to preview, so you're going to skim effectively. When I say skim effectively, I need to know the author, I need to know the title of the work, and is it the whole text or is it part of a text? And any eye-catching images you'll see, like if there's a graph or something, you're going to want to take note of that. Chunk, this is huge. A lot of text that you will read, there's a lot of it, so it's better for you to annotate in chunks. Normally you'll break it into paragraphs, but even some paragraphs can be pretty big, as you'll see, as one of them is pretty big today. And so you can break it down even into sentences, okay? Because some text, once you become a really good writer, you can write really long sentences, and so it'll have to be broken down. And then reread the text one more time if you do have time. Now, I do understand that there's some times where you won't be able to do that, but it is really good to actually reread stuff because you'll catch things the second time you read it. and then review your symbols and notes to make sure they make sense, and then repeat the process. Any questions for that? Okay, good. I know it was riveting. We're gonna practice together. And then again, if you can show me as a class that you not only can help me annotate it, but understand the text and make the connections, then I won't have to provide you guys an independent practice. And you're gonna learn that about me. If you participate as a class when I'm lecturing and you're answering questions with me, and you can demonstrate that you guys get it, then I don't necessarily need to assign an assignment, an individual assignment, okay? Because that shows me you guys understand what I'm doing. Make sense? All right, so here's what I think is fun because I am a nerd. So this lovely caricature is of Immanuel Kant. He is a philosopher. So before we even get started, in your phones, whatever device you have, type in what does philo mean in Greek? And somebody tell me what it means. What does philo mean in Greek? And love. Perfect. All right. So what does Sophia mean in Greek? Sophia in Greek. Wisdom. Wisdom. Okay. So in ancient Greece, they took Philo and Sophia, put together for philosophia, which is philosophy. So that would mean what? The love of wisdom. The love of wisdom. What's another term for wisdom? A synonym. Wise. Wise and huh? Knowledge. Okay. So therefore, philosophy is the study of knowledge. Okay. So this is what Miss Garcia's minor is. You know what a minor is? Okay, yeah. So my major was hello. Miss Garcia, I'm sorry. Yes, that delivery, I think, for you. For me? Oh yeah, that's one. Thank you. Okay, yes, ma'am. All right, sorry. Okay, so my major was English, my minor was philosophy. So I love the study of knowledge, right? I like to think about that stuff. So Senor Kant here, Immanuel Kant, from way back when, that was his job. He was a philosopher and he thought about knowledge all the time. Specifically, he studied epistemology. Okay, that is a philosophical study of the nature, the origins, and the limits of human knowledge. So he got paid just to sit around all day and think about how people think and what are the limitations to how they think. And then he would write papers and get money. Ms. Garcia has not yet figured out how to make a living that way, so now I'm a teacher. So what we're gonna do today is we're gonna look over one of his texts. Now, I'm gonna tell you right now, this text is actually from college, okay? It's from one of my college classes. However, I have broken it down, made it a little bit smaller. I condensed a very large part into one page. But we're going to work through it together and you're going to figure it out. And then when you leave here, you will be able to understand a college philosophical text. And you can go out there and sound really smart and be like, of course I know what Immanuel Kant says about knowledge, right? So you'll feel really good about yourself by the time. And you might be just as excited as me because philosophy very much is my jam and I love it to pieces. So let's take a look. So the first thing we're supposed to do when we annotate is look for important information. So it says excerpt from Immanuel Kant and answer to the question, what is enlightenment? So is this the full piece? Or how do I know it's not the full piece? Excerpt. Excerpt means part of, right? Or piece of. Okay, so I know it's just a piece of it. What is the paper going to be about just by the title?
What is enlightenment?
What is enlightenment, right? Answer to the question. So somebody somewhere asked the question, what is enlightenment? And in reality, it was another philosopher wrote an essay about what is enlightenment, and this is his response to it, okay? So he's responding, so it's a response to this question. Now, right off the bat, what do you think about the term enlightenment? What do you think it means? Or when you think enlightenment, what's the thing that you think of? A spotlight, okay. Normally it means like a spotlight on wisdom. It's like a time of like thinking. Okay, so you'll hear that in history there was a period of enlightenment. That's when a lot of the sciences started to come about, a lot of like philosophical thinking. So it's a time of thinking, a time of knowledge. So the Enlightenment used to be a time of knowledge. Okay. So knowing what you know about Kant from what I've already told you and the title, what do you think that this essay is going to be about?
Answering what am I?
What enlightenment and about
You know,
thinking and knowledge, okay? All right, so we're gonna chunk it. I'm originally gonna read you the first paragraph and then we're gonna dissect it sentence by sentence, okay? So enlightenment is mankind's exit from its self-incurred immaturity. Immaturity is the inability to make use of one's own understanding without the guidance of another. Self-incurred is the inability if its cause lies not in the lack of understanding, but rather in the lack of resolution and the courage to use it without the guidance of another. Now, this is a French term. I probably am going to mess it up. Sapere adu, have the courage to use your own understanding is thus the model of enlightenment. Now, many of you, like most people, when they read philosophy, are like, say what? That was just a whole bunch of words thrown at me, okay? But I promise you, by the time we're done with it, you're going to understand what he's saying. So let's look at the first sentence. Enlightenment is mankind's exit from its self-incurred immaturity. So do you guys know what self-incurred is? Not yet, right? So normally even I would circle this because I'm like, what in the world is self? Now, self tells me what? You do it to yourself, right? So we do it to ourselves, right? Oh, and just so you know, what's going to happen is I'm going to annotate and then I'll take a picture of it before I erase it. And then I'm going to post not just your interpretations of this, but also the other classes so that you'll have it. Okay. Now, when we think of immaturity, what do we think of?
acting like a child.
Acting like a child. So like childlike?
Yeah.
Okay. And what are some keys of childlike behavior, especially when it comes to thinking?
Being childish.
Do you really think things through?
Not really.
No, right? Like rash thinking, like quick judgment. Right. So not many decision making, right? Like not much thought, right? So not much thought. Okay. Now he says enlightenment is mankind's exit. So that means that we have to get rid of this, right? To reach this. Okay, so let's find out what this is. Because we're not quite able to define enlightenment yet because we need to figure out what this is first. Then he says immaturity is the inability to make use of one's own understanding without the guidance of another. So how does he define immaturity? The inability, so you can't do it, right? Can't do it. To make use of one's own understanding. What's one's own understanding? Your own,
Like, thoughts.
yeah, your own thoughts or knowledge, right? Thoughts / knowledge. Without the guidance of another. So immaturity is what? So when we look at guidance of another, so that's being told, right? Being told what? What to think. So he says immaturity is the inability to think for yourself, right?
Yeah.
So far, would you agree with him?
Yeah.
Would that be a key of immaturity? Yes. Okay. Then he says self-incurred is the inability if its cause lies not in the lack of understanding, but rather the lack of the resolution and the courage to use it without the guidance of another. So the inability, because we have repetition here, right? Inability. So he's saying self-incurred is an inability that lies not in the lack of understanding. So what does that mean?
Yeah. Doesn't violate
Yeah, so you might have the knowledge. It's not the fact that you don't know, right? So it's not So it's not that you don't have knowledge, right? Okay, but rather, okay, and if you ever really want to sound smart in writing, learn how to use rather. But rather in the lack of resolution. What's resolution? So effort, drive. If I have a resolution to do something, I'm determined. So like determination and drive. So we'll just say drive, because you know what drive means, right? Okay. And the courage to use it without the guidance of another. Okay. So it's not that you don't know, it's that you lack the drive and the courage to think for yourself, or to think without being told what to think. Does that make sense? Yes or no? Okay. So now we can say enlightenment is the ability to do what? It's the ability to think for yourself. Okay. So here, yeah, so this one is inability because you don't have drive. And what's the opposite of courage? Huh?
You said urge?
What's the courage? What's the opposite of courage? The opposite, the antonym. Huh? Just courage, but think of like, so if you have courage, you're being brave. When you're not brave, you are scared and are too scared to use it. Okay. So he's saying that basically the opposite of it, yes. So he's saying that to have enlightenment is to let go of the inability due to fear, right? Of not being able to think for yourself. Now, why would it be scary to not think for yourself? I mean, why would that be scary to think for yourself? Mistakes, right? How many of you are afraid to make mistakes? Most people are. Okay, so most people are afraid to make mistakes, right? That's just human nature. And if somebody else is making the decisions for me, am I being held accountable for that? If you make a mistake and other people are making the decisions.
People are telling you what to do.
If people are telling you what to do and they say, go do this, and it messes up, whose fault is it? Is it yours or theirs? Theirs, right? So it's a little bit easier. And so he says, separate adieu. Have the courage to use your own understanding is thus the model of enlightenment. So does that check out with this?
Yeah.
Okay, so this means that this is right. Okay, so I would say, have the courage to use your own understanding is thus the model of enlightenment. So that checks out. Enlightenment is the courage to use your own understanding. Okay, make sense so far? Are y'all understanding the college text? OMG. I think you are. Okay, so let's take a picture of it. Yeah. Okay, so I'm gonna take a picture and then, like I said, I'll post it, okay? Any questions so far? All right. Yeah, walk out here and be like, I can do philosophy. All right. Now, remember I said sometimes the paragraphs are really big?
Yeah.
And you have to break them down? That's also the case with this one. Now, because this is a very long paragraph. All right, so what we're going to do is I'm actually going to go sentence by sentence. And the reason I'm going to do that is because sometimes when texts are what we call dense, you know what dense is? Yeah, dense. When things are dense, it's really thick. Like it's hard to get through, right? So like the halls are very dense during passing period. Is it easy to get through there? No, right? You're kind of having to like jostle, find your way through. That's the way you need to think of some of these texts, okay? They're going to be a little bit harder. So what you do is you're taking one step at a time. Think of it that way. So we're going to do one sentence at a time because Kant is very good at writing really long sentences, okay? So it says, laziness and cowardice are the reason why such a great part of mankind long after nature has set them free from the guidance of others, still gladly remain immature for life, and why it is so easy for others to set themselves up as guardians. So what does immature mean again?
How is that?
Okay. Immaturity means not thinking for yourself, remember? Not thinking for yourself. For yourself. Because why? Because you lack what?
Courage.
Because you lack courage. Or you're afraid, right? So it says laziness and cowardice are the reason. Would you agree with that? So 1, 2, those are our reasons. Laziness and cowardice. So let's think about that. Is it easy to let other people decide for you if you're being lazy?
Yeah.
Yeah. Even Miss Garcia is very lazy, right? There's times where I'm like, I want to do the easy way, right? For example, I don't like to walk upstairs, right? I'm really lazy. So all my teacher friends from upstairs, I convince them to come see me. It's just easier because then I don't have to do the stairs and I don't have to take that death trap of an elevator, okay? So laziness. How often have you guys said, oh, I'm just going to be lazy? Right? Yes. So that makes sense. That laziness might be a reason why we refuse to think for ourselves. And then he says cowardice and being afraid. And we already talked about that, right? It is scary to make your own decisions because what if I mess up, right? What if I mess up? And he says such a great part of mankind. So does he think only a few people, a majority or minority? Not necessarily.
A great part.
So it's the majority, right? So he's saying a majority of society is not thinking for themselves. Would you agree or disagree? So far agree? Most, okay. Long after nature has set them free from the guidance of others. When are you guys free, technically, of the guidance of others to make your own choices? At 18, right? In the US, it's 18. Do you really think that's when you're free? No, right? I can honestly tell you this because my son is 19 and in the Navy, and I still will call him and be like, what are you thinking? What are you doing? Blah, 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 right? Or he'll call me and he'll be like, Ma, right? I have this issue. What should I do? Right? And I can't say anything because I'm 42 years old, and I promise you at least twice a week I call my mom and say, Ma, this is what's happening. What should I do? Right? So he's saying that long after we become able to make our own decisions, we still don't want to think for ourselves. Is that true? For the most part, yeah, right? And he says, still gladly remain immature for life. So even after we have the choice, right? So even after we have the choice to think for ourselves, right? Because right now, can you really think for yourself? I mean, you can, but who's going to overrule you? Yeah, your parents, right? Have you ever heard, this is my house? As long as you live in this house, right?
My rules.
These are my rules. Until you're an adult, right? How many times have we heard all that? Right? So he's saying that even after you get out of that, we decide to remain immature for life. Not just a little while, for like forever. And he says it's also why it is so easy for others to set themselves up as guardians. Who do we think guardians are? Parents. What other institutions? Who else tells you what to do? Teachers. Managers. Government. Right? Okay. Not like bosses, yeah, all of that stuff. Anybody that's over you and tells you you can or cannot do this, right? So he's saying because we choose not to think for ourselves, it makes it easy for other people to come in and set themselves up as guardians, and guardians are people who tell you what to think, right? Or how to think. So remember how to think. So remember when earlier this week I told you it's not my job to tell you how to think, it's to teach you how to think for yourself, right? Well, guardians would be the opposite. No, it's my job to tell you how to think. And how often do you guys get told how to think? All the time, right? But do you think it's just for you guys? No, right? Even me as an adult, I get told certain things, right? Do you agree with him that because people refuse to think for themselves, it makes it easy for people to come and say, oh, well, I'm going to lead you. This is what you do. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Okay. And then he says, it's so easy to be immature. So this is the easy way. So that implies what? That it's what to think for yourself. What's the opposite of being easy? Hard. It's hard to think for yourself. So he's acknowledging that, right? He's acknowledging that yes, it is hard to think for yourself. And then he's going to explain why. If I have a book that has understanding for me, a pastor who has a conscience for me, a doctor who judges my diet for me, and so forth, surely I do not need to trouble myself. So who are some guardians? He just named some. Doctor, pastor, and even a book. We're all guardians. Okay? And he's saying, well, I have this book that tells me what this means. I have a pastor or a priest that tells me what to believe. And then I have a doctor who tells me what I should and shouldn't eat. And then I have other people, right? Teachers who tell me what to think, parents who tell me what to do and not to do. Why would I trouble myself? What does that mean, trouble myself? Like, why would you bother, right?
Yeah.
Why bother? Okay. And so when you're thinking about that, what he's saying, can you see why people might choose not to think for themselves? Why it seems easier to be immature, right? He says, I have no need to think. If only I can play, others will take over the tedious business for me. So he's saying, I don't need to think every day, right? I can leave it up to somebody else and just play, right? If somebody's telling you, hey, at 8 o'clock, you're going to eat, and then, go play games from 9 to 10, right? If everything's laid out for you, is that not an easy life? If you don't think for yourself, if you don't want to think for yourself. So it's made it seem like that an immature life means you can play around, right? Now, remember when I told you about diction? Diction is words. When we think of play, who do we think of? People that play around. Children, immature people. So that's diction, okay? He's being very, very precise with his words, so it draws up the image of a child, immature. Others will take over the tedious business for me. What does tedious mean?
Takes a while.
Takes a while. So tedious jobs are the ones where you have to step by step. Okay, those are tedious jobs. So it's also slow, it's slow and hard. Because it's every single thing has to be, and think about decision making. Isn't decision making tedious? When you have to make a choice, that's pretty hard, right? Because you can't just say, okay, I'm going to do this and that's it, right? Especially as you get older, you have to sit there and think, well, if I do this, what happens to this, and this, right? So you really have to think through it, and it's hard. And if you're lazy and you're scared of decisions, it's easier for people just to accept. So let's think about that. How many of you have ever seen the Hunger Games or Divergent or any of those movies? Okay. Have you ever wondered while you're watching them, why are all these people just going along with everything? Why don't they just stand up and revolt, right? It's always that lone person that kind of Katniss stands up, right? She's like, I'm not doing this anymore. But everybody else is pretty, even when they're miserable, they continue on. Well, are all the people with power, right? Who graciously take up the oversight of mankind, take care that the far greater part of mankind regard the step to maturity as not only difficult, but also very dangerous. So first of all, what does graciously mean? Does anybody know? It's kind of out of kindness, oh, let me help you, right? So it's
Or-
kindness.
I know what you mean.
Yeah,
Like taking
yeah.
the chance, like, oh, there you go.
Yeah, like I'm helping you. Let me help you, right?
Yeah.
Do you think he's being literal, which means the actual word, or is he being sarcastic? Do you really think that he's being sarcastic, right? Because like, oh, let me take all that power for you. Let me hold that. Let me hold all your decision making problems for you. But in reality, you've just given me all your what? Power, right? So he's being sarcastic. Another word for sarcastic, if you want $1,000 word, is facetious. And sometimes you'll hear me say, I'm just being facetious. I'm being sarcastic, okay? So he's writing in a very sarcastic tone. So the guardians, the people with power, graciously have taken up the oversight of mankind. What does that mean, oversight? Oversight is another type of word for like control, like controlling things. If I'm going to watch over something so I can control it, okay? And then of mankind, which is society, right? Take care that far greater part of mankind. So again, is it a minority or majority of mankind? Majority. So majority regard the step, right? The step to maturity, which is to what? Maturity is what? Thinking for yourself. As not only difficult, but also very dangerous. Okay, so the people with power set it up. Yes. The people with power set it up so that you don't want to think for yourself. One, because you think of it as too hard, but more importantly, you think of it as dangerous. How many times has a parent ever said, you can't do this because this bad thing's going to happen to you? Right? And even when you're like, that's crazy, but it's still back there, right? Because most of us don't want danger. Most of us try to stay safe, or we think of danger to others. So he's saying that the people with power make it to where you don't want to think for yourself because it is just too dangerous and difficult. After they have first made their domestic animals stupid and carefully prevented these placid creatures from daring to take even one step out of the leading strings of the cart to which they are tethered, they show them the danger that threatens them if they attempt to proceed on their own. Okay, so there's a lot in that. So who are the domestic animals? People, right? Have you ever heard of the term sheeple? Have you ever heard that? All the sheeple are following. Okay, so it's a play on words. Sheep follow the herd person, right? And that's kind of what he's saying. So he's saying that people have been turned into domestic animals that are stupid. He's being very precise with his words and carefully prevented them, these placid creatures. So are the people that are not thinking, are they even like on the level of a man? No, they're lower, right? So again, he's saying domestic animals and creatures. He's comparing man to less than. He's saying man is less than. The non-thinking man is less than. From even daring to take one step out of the leading strings of the cart, but they are tethered. Remember I taught you guys about euphemisms? Euphemisms are polite ways to say things like bless your heart. This is also a euphemism. Leading strings to the cart means being controlled. Have you ever heard anybody saying, oh, they're pulling their strings? That's being controlled. Okay, so he's saying that the people with power have made a majority of society stupid because they don't think for themselves. And now they can control them. And then they show them the danger that threatens them if they dare to proceed on their own, which means if they dare to think. So I have control of you, and now I'm going to put the fear in you so you don't want to think for yourself. Do you think that truly happens? Does that happen in society? Okay. So proceed on their own means to think for themselves. Okay. Are we understanding so far?
Mhm.
All right, we're almost done. Now this danger is not so great, for by falling a few times, they would indeed finally learn to walk. But an example of this sort makes them timid, and usually frightens them away from all further attempts. So does he think that the danger is real? It might be real, but is it really severe? No, right? So there might be some danger, right? Some danger, but it's not deadly, right? And then he says, for by falling a few times, they would learn to walk. What does he mean by that? They'll learn from their mistakes, right? Okay. So Ms. Garcia has a saying that I tell everybody, if it's true you learn from your mistakes, I must be a genius, because I make a lot of them, right? That's what happens when you start to think for yourself and you start to make those choices. Okay, but an example of this sort makes them timid. What does timid mean? Scared. Hesitant, right? And usually frightens them away. So what is he saying a majority of people do? Right, they're too scared to think for themselves, right? So they stay scared and don't think for themselves. Okay? So now hashtag summary. So the first step of a summary is to notate the author and the title, right? So who's my author? Kant argues, right? And then and we're going to shorten it. We're going to say, what is enlightenment, right? That people are what? What's the term he uses? Remember, it starts with the immature, okay? He defines, because remember, you're looking just for key points, right? So he defines immaturity as what? In your own words. Not thinking for themselves. Yes. Sure. Okay. So instead, Kant states that people follow who? Who do they follow? Follow the guardians. Okay, so now we have two of the main points, and it says, however, right, which is one of Ms. Garcia's absolute favorite words. I love the word however, it's a fancy but. Okay, however, Kant believes people should what?
Try.
People should try to do what? Should try to think for themselves. Okay, so in Kant's mind, the only way to be enlightened, the only way to be free is to think for yourself. Now, is he saying that that's easy? No. Okay, so when we think about this text, which you guys have just interpreted a college text, woo-hoo, you guys. And now you can go out there and be like, I know philosophy. How does this tie into effort and growth mindset?
You're saying you try.
Right? Even if it's hard, you should try to think for yourselves, okay? And that's the growth mindset, knowing that you can think for yourselves. It's going to be hard, right? Is it easy to go against everybody? No, right? Think about right now in the world, all the times you might want to say your opinion and then everybody's like, right? It's not easy. So sometimes it's just easier to be like, I'm just going to go with the flow, right? But is that what Kant's saying you should do?
No.
No. And a growth mindset would show you it's okay. It's going to be hard. I can do it. I got it. I can think for myself. And that basically was a long way of me telling you guys that in this class, my main goal for you is for you to think for yourselves. I don't necessarily always want you to agree with me. There's going to be times where we interpret text or we talk about text and I may say it means this, but you may analyze it differently. Let me know what that is, because maybe if you can prove it to me, I can see it in a different light. Because my goal is that once you leave this class, my English class, you can go out in the world and think for yourselves, right? Now, again, there's gonna be times where it is easier to go with the flow, or you can call mom, right? I still call mom, because she knows best, and figure things out. But for the most part, I want you to go out there and to be able to think for yourselves, right? To form your own judgments about the world around you. Because it's very easy to say, well, I'll just go with what so-and-so thinks, okay? So does that sound fair? Can you guys do that for my class? Think for yourselves? Yes, yes, we can have growth mindset. All right, cool. So we're done for the day. I'm gonna take a picture of it. I'll post everything online by tonight. Again, the locker is due on Sunday. If you have a little bit of time now, you can work on it. If not, again, Sunday. If you run into any issues, make sure to email me and I'd be happy to help you, okay? Any questions?